I remember very clearly the summer of 2018 sitting on the back porch where I was living that year. And this was when the reemergence of the sex abuse scandals were coming about. I was just feeling very down, obviously, and very frustrated and sickened by the whole thing. And I remember thinking, I didn't sign up for this. That was my first thought. And immediately after I had that thought, I thought another thought. And I said, well, yes, I did. It's exactly what I signed up for. Right? I signed up to be another Christ. I didn't sign up for that particular suffering, but I signed up for suffering. Right? I signed up to be a priest. I signed up to serve in his church, and we worship a God who was crucified. Right? In fact, we process in behind the symbol of Jesus crucified, right? The crucifix. And so my life as a priest, as another Christ, is going to be filled with suffering. It's not going to be the suffering that I necessarily want, but I don't want any suffering because I'm weak, but it's going to be filled with suffering. But the same is true for every Christian, right? We call ourselves Christians because we are followers of Christ. That means that this is our fate too, right? That each one of us who truly follows Christ is going to suffer. And so how can we prepare to suffer well? How can we not let our faith be shaken whenever we do come to these moments where we are going to suffer? The gospel today gives us 3 points of how to do this. First, right, Jesus says, whoever wishes to come after me has to deny himself. And so we need to practice denying ourselves. Again, this is something that I am not very good at. I don't like to deny myself. In fact, yesterday I was out eating and we had dessert, and then when I got home, I ate more dessert. Because I don't like to deny myself. It's very difficult. And that may seem kind of silly, but we have to do that. Right? Every time I can say no to myself in a little way helps me to deny myself and to build up my ability to endure suffering. And so this has been part of our faith for the longest time, right? To do penance. Not a couple days ago, but the Friday before, I had the Friday Mass for our students, and I became very popular because I preached about how the church still commands every Catholic to abstain from meat every Friday out of the year. Not just on the Fridays during Lent, but every Friday is a day where we are not supposed to eat meat. If we have to eat meat, like say someone invites me over to their house and I don't tell them that I don't want to eat meat and they serve me meat, well, I'm going to eat it because they're being very generous. But I should do some other form of penance. Right? But the preference is always not to eat meat. Unless it's a solemnity. That's a joyful day. Right? It doesn't sound very hard, and people will often remark to me, but Father, we live in South Louisiana. That's not that difficult. Well, if it's not that difficult, how come we're not doing it? And it doesn't say in the Code of Canon Law that you can't eat meat, but you have to gorge yourself on delicious seafood. You can eat an egg sandwich. Right? You can eat something very simple. You can deny yourself in that way, and that helps us to be able to suffer well. Right? Other things we can do, some crazy people take cold showers. It's a way of denying ourselves some creature comfort. Right? To be able to say no to something that is good, that is pleasing, but that we can do without. Not eating in between meals. Right? All of these things are ways that the Lord calls us to deny ourselves, to be able to suffer well. The second thing that he says in the gospel is to take up your cross. Again, these are not things that I like to hear, but it's what we're commanded to do. And so we are called to take up our cross, especially in very small ways every day. All right, I don't know about you. I don't know if you've thought about this much or not, but for me, this is the most difficult thing. Right? I want to be a martyr, not that I think I'm holy enough to be one, not that I think I would have the strength to endure the suffering that the martyrs endure, but I feel like it would be better because people would know that I suffered. Right? People would think back to, oh, Father Broussard and the wonderful things he did. But the reality for my life is that most of my sufferings are things that nobody's going to know about. Right? Getting out of bed when the alarm goes off. That is the worst. But it's a little thing that I can do to take up my cross that day. Right? To get out of bed. To do what I have to do, to exercise or pray or whatever it is. Right? Taking up my cross to do what it is God is calling me to do. Maybe taking up our cross means that we are going to talk to someone and be kind to them even though they annoy us. Right? I don't particularly care for this person. They usually say something that frustrates me. But you know what? I'm going to be kind and talk to them anyway. Now, if you know you're going to fly off the handle and yell at them, then avoid them. But try to go out of your way to talk to someone that either annoys you or maybe you just naturally are not gravitating towards. Right? I try to challenge myself to do this in the cafe. Now, if I come talk to you in the cafe, it doesn't mean you annoy me. Right? I talk to a lot of people. But I do try to stretch myself and talk to people that maybe, because I'm not a great conversationalist. Right? I need someone else to help me keep the conversation going. And so I will stretch myself a little bit and talk to someone who maybe isn't the best at conversation like me, and we'll just have an awkward conversation together. Right? Because they deserve it, and I do too. Maybe taking up your cross means doing your schoolwork instead of hanging out with friends. Right? All of these things, again, are not huge, but they help us to be ordered to suffer, to do things that we don't necessarily want to do. Being silent when you want to be uncharitable. Being silent when you're tempted to talk about someone. Right? Picking up your cross and not doing it. And then the last thing Jesus tells us is follow me. Follow me. That sounds so nice, right? I can read this in the comfort of my house with the air conditioning and a chair that's not hard to sit in. And it sounds great. Jesus, I want to follow you. But then whenever it actually comes time to follow Jesus, and I have to be persecuted for it, it's not as easy. And if I don't have that habit of denying myself comforts, picking up my cross, and following Jesus every single day in those little ways, it's going to be Now, we always leave room for God's grace, right? But it's probably going to be impossible for me to follow him in difficult ways if I can't do it in simple ways. And so we have to follow Jesus, right? Peter did not want to hear this. Peter loved hearing Jesus compliment him on how he said he was the Christ, but Peter rejected the idea that Jesus would suffer. Because he knew that if he was going to follow Jesus, that the same fate awaited him. That he was going to have to suffer. That he was going to have to pick up his cross. And that he was going to have to literally die. Right? We know Peter was crucified upside down right near where the Vatican is today. And so how do we follow Jesus in our everyday life? Well, maybe following Jesus means saying no to going to a party or hanging out with a group of friends that you know is not going to be good for you. I was at somebody's house just recently and they told me, hey, we didn't let her go to a party the other night. She was mad. That's good parents. I can say it now. They were mean parents when I was a kid. But it means saying no to those things. Right? Following Jesus instead of following the crowd. Maybe it means sacrificing time with people that you want to hang out with to go to Mass. You're here now, so you're doing it. Maybe you didn't want to, but here you are. But even during the week, right? Putting aside things that are not going to help us to grow in holiness to do things that will. Right? Putting aside those things that are going to distract us from growing in our relationship with Christ. Maybe it means to follow Jesus that we should literally unfollow people or pages on social media. Right? I'm doing this from time to time, right? My goodness, that person is constantly getting under my skin. You know what? I'm just going to let it go. Why am I going to continue to allow them to upset me and allow myself to be uncharitable in my thoughts and maybe in my words? No, get rid of it. If it's not helping you to grow closer to Christ, to follow him, then what are we doing? Right? I think about this often because in times past, not anymore because I'm so mature now, but in times past, I wasted a lot of time on social media or watching hilarious clips on YouTube. And it's kind of scary to think about my judgment day. When Jesus is going to ask me, well, what did you do to proclaim the gospel? What did you do to bring people to me? And I'm going to have to own the fact that I wasted a lot of time scrolling through a bunch of nonsense instead of proclaiming the gospel. Things that led me away from Christ instead of helping me to follow him. Right? We are called to do things that are uncomfortable at times. And so individually, these seem like very small and sometimes insignificant things. But that's how we grow in virtue, by doing very small, virtuous acts over and over and over again. Right? That's how we grow in the spiritual life. That's how we do everything in life. Yet we don't realize it when it comes to the spiritual life. And so over time, as we add up all of these ways of sacrificing, right, they transform us to be the true disciples of Christ that we are called to be. They build up virtue in us so that if or when something great is required of us, we'll be prepared to do it and we'll have the strength to be able to do something when it costs us, when it's difficult. And so as Christians, as members of the body of Christ, right, this is what we've signed up for. And this is what Jesus calls us to today when he says, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me.